So they've got you figured out, haven't they? You're the selfish one. You're the one who doesn't listen. You're the manipulative one, the dishonest one, the one who always makes everything about yourself. They told you that. Probably more than once. Probably with enough conviction that you started writing it down somewhere in the back of your mind as fact. And here's what I really want to know. When they said all of that, when they laid out this detailed, specific, almost impressively thorough description of your worst qualities, did any part of you stop and think, hang on? That's not me. That's them. Because that's exactly what it was. Projection is the oldest trick in the book and somehow still the one that lands hardest. Because it comes dressed as honesty. It comes dressed as someone who cares enough to tell you the difficult truth about yourself. And you, because you're the kind of person who actually reflects, who actually takes criticism seriously, who actually asks yourself whether you could do better, you took it. You sat with it. You lost sleep over it. While they slept just fine. Look at the specific things they accused you of. Not the vague stuff, the specific, detailed, almost personal accusations. You always twist things. You only think about yourself, you can't be trusted. I want you to think about where you've actually seen that behavior in this relationship. Think about who it actually describes. Because people who are secure in who they are don't build detailed cases against their partner's character. They don't have that kind of material just ready to go. They were describing themselves. To your face. And calling it a conversation. Here's the thing about projection. It isn't just a psychological quirk. It isn't someone who's a little insecure occasionally saying something they don't mean. When it's used the way it's been used on you, it's a very specific, very deliberate mechanism. And it does two jobs at once. Which is what makes it so efficient. Job 1. It offloads. Whatever they are doing, the lying, the manipulation, the selfishness, the games, instead of sitting with that, instead of owning it, they hand it to you. They take the thing that lives in them and they put it on you. And the moment you're busy defending yourself against the accusation, they're off the hook. Nobody's looking at them anymore. Everyone's looking at you. Job 2. It destabilizes. Because here's what happens when someone you're close to tells you repeatedly that you are manipulative, dishonest, selfish, difficult. At first you push back. But they're consistent. They're convincing. And you, because you actually have a conscience, you start wondering. Maybe I did come across that way. Maybe I'm not seeing myself clearly. Maybe they know something about me that I don't. And just like that, your grip on your own reality starts to loosen. Exactly as intended. See, this is why projection is so particularly vicious. It doesn't just protect them. It actively breaks you down at the same time. Every accusation is a 2-for-1. They walk away clean and you walk away smaller. And the accusations are never random. If you think about it carefully, really carefully, the things they've accused you of map almost perfectly onto the things you've actually experienced from them. You never take responsibility. Said by the person who has never once in your entire relationship said I was wrong without immediately following it with a but. You twist everything I say. Said by the person who can reframe a conversation mid-sentence until you can't remember what you were even trying to say. That's not a coincidence. That's a confession. Delivered with confidence and aimed directly at you. And the most brutal part of all of it? They knew. Maybe not consciously, maybe not with a plan written down somewhere. But some part of them knew exactly what they were doing. Because it kept working. Every single time you doubted yourself instead of them, that was the whole point. Let me ask you something. Who were you before they had you convinced you were the problem? Not in a vague, abstract sense, actually think about it. The specific version of you that existed before their voice took up permanent residence in your head and started narrating your every move. Because that person is still in there. They're just buried under an enormous amount of someone else's garbage that got handed to you and labeled as self-awareness. Let's start with your self-image. Because that's where projection does its deepest damage. You used to have a relatively clear sense of who you were. Not perfect, nobody is, but yours. You knew your values. You knew your intentions. You knew when you'd done something wrong because it felt wrong from the inside. Now look at where you are. You second-guess everything. You apologize for things you didn't do. You over-explain yourself in conversations with people who never even ask for an explanation because you've been so conditioned to defend your character that you do it automatically now even when nobody is attacking you. That is not personal growth. That is what it looks like when someone else's distorted reflection of you replaces your own. Then there's your relationships with the people around you. Think about how many conversations you've had where you were explaining their behavior to people who care about you. Not just venting, explaining. Defending. Finding reasons. And while you were busy doing that, you were also quietly absorbing the narrative they'd built about you. The selfish one. The difficult one. The one who always makes everything complicated. And even if you never fully believed it, some of it stuck. Because it always does when it comes from someone close enough to aim properly. And your ability to trust yourself? This is the one that takes the longest to rebuild. Because projection, done consistently, doesn't just make you doubt specific decisions. It makes you doubt your own perception. Your own memory. Your own instincts. You watched something happen with your own eyes and by the end of the conversation you weren't sure what you'd seen. You felt something clearly and by the time they were done you were apologizing for feeling it. That is not confusion. That is the result of having your reality systematically dismantled by someone who needed you uncertain. Because uncertain people don't leave. Uncertain people stay and keep trying to figure out where they went wrong. And here's what that has cost you beyond the relationship itself. Every area of your life that requires you to trust your own judgment has quietly suffered. Decisions you should have made with confidence. Boundaries you should have held without question. Opportunities you talked yourself out of because the voice in your head, their voice, wearing your face, told you that you weren't reliable enough to trust your own read on things. You didn't lose your instincts. They were taken. Carefully. Consistently. And on purpose. And it is time you started taking them back. All right. Here come the excuses. The ones you've been quietly assembling since this all started. The ones that feel so reasonable inside your head that you've almost convinced yourself they're conclusions you reached on your own. Let's take them apart. One by one. But they genuinely believe what they're saying. Maybe. And you know what that makes it? Worse. Because if they genuinely believe you are the manipulative, selfish, dishonest one, while doing all of those things themselves, that means their grip on reality is so distorted that they have completely absolved themselves of everything. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a person who has built an entire internal world where they are never the problem. And you are living inside that world with them. How's that working out? But I'm not perfect either. Maybe they have a point. Of course you're not perfect. Nobody is. But there is a very clear difference between someone who occasionally gets it wrong and owns it, and someone who has a ready-made detailed character assassination of you available at a moment's notice every single time they need to deflect from something. Genuine feedback comes from a place of wanting things to be better. Projection comes from a place of needing you to be the problem. You know which one this is. But they've never actually lied to me. Haven't they? Because telling you that you are the manipulative one, when you're not, is a lie. Telling you that you twist everything, when they're the ones rewriting reality mid-conversation, is a lie. Telling you that you're too sensitive, too difficult, too much, when what they actually mean is that you're too aware and getting too close to the truth, is a lie. They've been lying to you this whole time. Just not in the way you were looking for. But sometimes I do recognize myself in what they say. Yes. Because they're clever enough to mix in just enough truth to make the rest land. A small, accurate observation buried inside a distorted accusation is still a distorted accusation. Don't mistake the 1% truth for the whole thing being fair. That's exactly what they're counting on. But if I bring this up, they'll just say I'm being defensive. Of course they will. Because, your being defensive is the perfect response to someone who is starting to see through it. It takes the evidence and reframes it as further proof of your problem. It's airtight. It's also completely transparent once you know what you're looking at. And now you know what you're looking at. Right. Let's get to it. You've been carrying a version of yourself that they built. A version that's smaller than you, more uncertain than you, more guilty than you. A version that second-guesses every instinct, apologizes for every boundary, and spends an exhausting amount of time trying to be better for someone who had absolutely no intention of ever being better for you. And here's what I need you to really hear. Everything they told you about yourself, the selfishness, the manipulation, the dishonesty, that was never a critique. That was a mirror they held up backwards. They were showing you themselves and calling it you. And it worked because you're the kind of person who looks. Who actually considers it. Who loses sleep over the possibility that they might be right. They were never right. They were just very good at making you think they were. So now what? Now you know what projection is. You know how it works, what it cost you, and why every excuse you had for it doesn't hold up. The question isn't whether you understand it. You do. The question is what you do with that understanding. Because understanding something and actually letting it change how you move are two very different things. You can keep carrying their version of you. Keep apologizing for things you didn't do. Keep shrinking yourself to fit inside the story they needed you to believe. Or you can put it down. Not dramatically, not with a big confrontation, not with a speech they won't hear anyway. Just, put it down. Quietly. Firmly. The way you pick up something that was never yours and set it back where it came from. You are not who they said you are. You never were. And the sooner you stop trying to prove that to them and start just knowing it for yourself, the sooner you get back to who you actually are. They were confessing. You were just listening to the wrong part. The talk is over. The rest is yours.